Hey, welcome to Rockhound Talk Live, the only live Rockhound podcast on Facebook and YouTube. I'm your host, Amber Nicole, and this is my co host, Ben. How are you?
Hey everyone, I am doing pretty good. I'm a little tired. I've been working quite a lot, but
Yeah.
I am excited. And then how are you? I think I saw you went out to New York again.
Yeah. And I'll be going back again. Oh my gosh, let me just tell you. Dirty Diamond Diggers. Incredible. Like I heard about it throughout the year. But it really didn't get to be like a buzz thing until my friend Dawn went and she's like, oh my God, you need to get here. Like there's some kind of anomaly at this location. Um, Literally in 18 minutes, I pulled out a hand-sized golden healer. Like it was like I probably have like I don't know, I probably came out with like 6 or 7 Goonies. Like I mean,
Wow.
and listen, and I have like a whole like quartz bag full of like, like the size. I mean, it's literally Herkimer diamond heaven. Like it's so incredible. So had a great time, and then we met up with some friends. I had my friends from Canada were coming in, and it kind of like synced up with when I was going. So we got to see each other because we hadn't mined since last year together. So
Hmm.
that was a lot of fun. It was just such a great weekend. And then I'm going to be going back at the end of the month, October 28th, back to Dirty Dime Diggers before they close for the season. It's like their last weekend. And
Okay.
I'm actually going to go with a potential guest for season 3.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah. Fish and Gold Miles. He's a
Oh,
YouTuber.
yes.
Yeah, he's a YouTuber and a TikTok creator. He's got like tons of followers, and he's never done any kind of mining besides for gold. So he kind of heard the buzz and wants to try it out. So we're gonna meet and go up there and do some mining and some content and stuff. So really excited to meet him. See if I can convince him to come on the show.
It'll be a lot different than sluicing or panning for gold. That's a little
Yeah,
bit
for
more of some hard
sure.
rock stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
you'll
yeah.
definitely get a workout in. I know that's for
Oh
sure.
my gosh, yes, yes, for sure. So yeah, I'm it's like I wish I lived in New York. It's such a great place to mine. It's not too far, but 8 hours is kind of a trek. So this last weekend in October will probably be my last time until the spring. So yeah, and you've been just busy working, huh?
Yeah, unbelievably busy working. I've actually been trying to because I've got a work conference coming up in December in Las Vegas. I'm taking time off to go and hopefully see some of the sites not in Vegas but around Vegas and look for rocks because crowds aren't really my thing. And so like going to the casinos, I'll probably do that one night and then spend the rest of the time trying to get out and look for rocks. But I've been trying to like I bought a book on rock hunting near Barstow. I've been looking up stuff and I've been so busy with work, it's just been ridiculous. I did my timesheet for last week and it was 80 hours.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm flying in and out of Montana on Sundays and going straight to other sites. And this last couple weeks, we had our Minnesota Mineral Club show, which was really awesome. It was my first time having a public display for my fluorescent minerals,
Yeah,
which
I saw that. It
yeah,
was
it was
really
really well
good.
received. I'm really happy
Yes.
about it. I've got some points to hopefully make it better for next time, so I'm really excited about that. But between work and that, I on Monday took a day off, and it was my first day off in 3 weeks. So
Oh wow.
it's yeah, it's a much needed break this week before I fly back to Montana on Sunday for another long stint of work. So just been really busy, but it's been great because now I'm saving up some money to help out with some of the trips and I know that'll happen, soon. Winter's coming around the corner, and
Yep.
I am excited though because work will slow down, and now that I have a house, I'm like already like okay, I can like organize my rock collection. I can start tumbling again. I can start doing all the things that I wanted to do when I got a house that I've been so busy with work I haven't been able to do. So
Yeah.
that and I did see some videos someone was using I think it was like an angle grinder or something, and they were
Mhm.
like cutting. I think it was for a Herkimer diamond, and they were like
Yeah.
cutting through the rock to get it. And
Uh-huh.
I was out buying some things because I need to go to the hardware store, and I was like, I'm gonna treat myself. And so I actually bought it's an angle grinder, and I can also get it as a sander. And so I think some of my Herkimer diamond pieces, I'm gonna cut
Yeah.
off some of the excess stuff
Yeah.
and um
Kind of like buff them out and like
yeah, and
smooth it.
there's a few like I got one where there's like a pocket and you can see into it, and so I want
Hmm.
to try to break off some of the edges so I can actually expose the crystals under it. So
Yeah.
it'll be a lot of playing around, and I also last time I was at the hardware store bought a ton of different acids to use, so
Oh yeah.
that'll be a lot of fun. I already did buy my respirator cartridges, rubber gloves. I've got safety glasses, so I've already got that covered. So it's more of trying to find the time to,
Yeah.
like I've got sulfamic acid for my copper minerals that I haven't touched since I got them in May, and there's a whole bunch of
God,
stuff like
has it
that.
been May? Gosh, it's already been that long.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, holy cow! I'm like, that was almost 5 months ago that I
It
went to Michigan
was.
to look
Yeah.
for copper. Yeah, it's been crazy. So yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, too, I'm just loving to go out. I should say I do have one more field trip planned. I am actually going
Oh,
out
okay.
on Saturday. I'm leading a Minnesota Mineral Club trip. We're going to a spot local here. It's got a starlight mica schist, and the
Oh yeah.
starlight crystals will erode out by the Mississippi River, and you can just go down and find a bunch of little starlight crystals. So that'll be my Saturday morning, showing some people how to find starlight crystals, and hopefully we'll find a bunch.
Yeah. You'll have to post. I want to see, I'd like to see them.
Yeah, I
Um,
had good luck. I've only been there once. I did have good luck. I found a handful, and I did find a couple of, they call them the fairy crosses because they'll form
mhm.
twins, and sometimes they form actual crosses. And so I did find a couple last time because those are like the sought after crystals for
Mhm.
starlight. So I'm excited to get out there and hopefully get some people. Actually, over half the people that are on the trip are people that signed up at our Mineral Club show. So I'm really excited because they're people that they've never done these like rock hunting field trips before, and so I
Oh
get to
yeah.
take them
That's
out. So
exciting. Yeah.
yeah.
You were talking about different acids. I was experimenting with some muriatic acid. I found some fossils from the silica shale where I live,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, and I so a lot of them will have like limestone um, over pyrite that's on top of limestone, and so you want to get the pyrite to be exposed. So I experimented with some and I left them in longer than I should have. Like we're it's literally minutes, like literally minutes.
Yeah.
And I like should have been like 3 or 5, and I like left them in for like 12, and it
Ooh.
like yeah. And so I did it a second time, and I left them in for 3 minutes. Came out perfect. So it was just like a little trial and error, and it was okay because I had enough to play with, but it was kind of actually like a good learning process just so I can teach others. Like really when they say 3 to 5 minutes, like literally 3 to 5 minutes, because any moment after that, it just starts to dissolve. And especially if the pyrite's been oxidized at all, then it really
Oh
will break down. So yeah, I was experimenting with that as well.
yeah. I actually heard because we did a mineral club trip to Arizona, and I was at the show, and people were showing off like we had a field trips table, so people would bring in some things they found on field trips. And I was talking to someone, and he had it was like different like layered calcite. I can't remember
Mhm.
exactly where it was from. But he said that what they do is they kind of shock it with like muriatic acid because it will
Okay.
dissolve calcite. And
Right.
he said you literally put it in like a calcite bath for like 5 minutes and
Hmm.
take it out. But the calcite, because it starts to it just sort of bonds it, and it makes it almost more stable. It's really weird.
Oh, well, that's
Um,
interesting. That's interesting, actually, because I kind of did that as an experiment with some of my calcite. I had some calcite that, like, I just wanted to smooth out and just make aesthetically like prettier. That it had some dings and stuff, and I just like kind of dipped it in and just did it. Nothing longer than even a minute, and it really just cleaned up the outside, and I mean, when you said bonding, that was kind of like my first thing that I thought. It looked like it was more together. I don't know. It looked aesthetically better. I reached the goal, but that's kind of
yeah.
interesting that you mentioned that. What acid were they using?
I think it was muriatic. It was
Okay.
it's like that lower form of like hydrochloric
Yeah.
acid. I
Yeah.
think it's got to be a step up. Like I know some people to get rid of calcite on, like some of their specimens and minerals, they'll use like vinegar.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough acidity in it to
Yeah.
really do much. I am going to experiment. When I was at the hardware store, when I bought a bunch of acids, there was one that was like, I can't remember what percent it is, but it's like not just like grocery store vinegar. It's like high powered vinegar. It's like
Oh, yeah.
30% or something.
Yeah.
So,
It's like medical
um,
grade or something or like that, or like cleaning vinegar or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a bunch of that stuff that that I need to try out to try to figure that out. But yeah, I think it's got to be like an acid that it will just start, basically pulling out the I mean, not to get too much into aqueous geochemistry, but the acid will be removing out the calcium ions, and then I think whatever goes on, then it just sort of smooths it out, or maybe it's also pulling out the if there's water in it. I'm not sure, but yeah. Speaking of going out to New York, you've got a comment from Fish and Gold.
Oh, hey, Fish and Gold. Hey, Miles. Thanks for joining us. So, do you want to bring out our guest?
Yeah, so our guest tonight is she goes by Dykanite on TikTok. She is a really cool geologist who, if you are into volcanology at all, volcanoes, she's got just a ton of different videos on volcanoes. We've got some photos, which I am extremely jealous of because volcanoes are one of my first loves getting into geology. And she just also has just a ton of content about LGBTQ in both the sciences and also her personal life. She does what she calls gay geology. So
Yeah,
it's
she's just fire. I can't wait to get her on the show. Like I love her energy. I love, her enthusiasm, her just like her energy is great. Like I'm excited to have her on as a guest. What a great guest to have for our last episode of the season.
yes.
So
So yeah,
let's
welcome.
welcome Dykanite Denali.
Hey, yeah, yeah. Either one works. Hey, how's it
Yeah,
going?
good. Glad to have you.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So most of our guests, we
Mhm.
like to definitely know a little bit more about them and their journey. So why don't you kind of just share with us how you got started into the career that you're in, your path into geology that's led you to volcanology?
Yeah, sure. So geology is often called like a found major. A lot of people don't really get the opportunity to learn geology in like K through 12, like high school. And so people will often, take a geology course just as like a gen ed in college and be like, oh my God, this is so cool. I started off pre-med. Pretty much everyone in like my immediate family is either medical or military. So that was like, of course, that's what I was going to do. That's what everyone in my family did. So I started off pre-med, and I've always like loved science and loved learning things in general, which can kind of make it hard to narrow down like what you want to spend your whole life learning because that's a different level of commitment. Um, but I came to the conclusion that I liked medicine and I do think that I was good at it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I never looked at anyone in the field of medicine and saw their life and said that's what I want. I'm sure it would have been a good life, but I wanted more than that, and so I ended up taking some time off of school to figure out what I wanted because I definitely didn't want to go into debt, pay a bunch of money for college for something that I didn't actually want to do. Um, and I was like, okay, I know I don't like medicine enough to do it my whole life. What do I do like? What do I even like? And I grew up in Southeast Alaska, like the first half of my childhood on like a little ocean, a little island in the middle of the ocean. And so I've always like really loved nature, and I've especially loved the ocean. Um, and so I was like, I'll take an earth science class and an oceanography class and see how it goes, see what careers I can maybe do with that. And in my oceanography, I was taking at a community college, and in my oceanography class, we learned about mid-ocean ridges. And so a mid-ocean ridge is where you have the two tectonic plates and they're diverging apart, and you have magma and then lava coming up between them and solidifying into a kind of rock called mid-ocean ridge basalt. And the entire ocean floor, for the most part, is made of this stuff. And the mid-ocean ridge is like hundreds of kilometers of like active volcanism. And I had never learned that. I was like, what do you mean the ocean floor is covered in hundreds of kilometers of volcanoes? Like, that's insane. Like, what do you mean it's all made from the same kind of rock? I had never heard that before in my whole life. And I literally remember reading the exact, paragraph where it talks about that in the textbook and being like, oh, I want to do that. Like, I didn't like underwater volcanoes. Like, I wasn't necessarily surprised that underwater volcanoes existed, but I never thought about it. It wasn't something that came up before. And so as soon as the concepts got into my head, like, wait, I could do that. That's what I wanted to do. And so I applied to University of Florida's geology program with the specific intention of studying mid-ocean ridge volcanism, because there was a professor who worked there who's like internationally known for his work on mid-ocean ridges, and that's who I ended up doing my undergraduate thesis with. So like a year and a half after learning that mid-ocean ridges exist, I was finishing a thesis on mid-ocean ridges, and it was just the coolest thing. And that's what got me started in volcanology was submarine volcanology first, and like really loving the ocean. And once I got into one kind of volcano, I was like, let's go see all the volcanoes. So I was able to do some field work in Iceland when the first recent eruption in Iceland back in 2021 on Reykjanes Peninsula happened. I knew I wanted to do an undergraduate thesis in something, and that was actually originally what I was going to be doing the thesis on, because I saw it erupt on TV and I was like, I have to go. And so I emailed my advisor like 2 a.m. And I think this is one of the reasons why he liked me, is I can sometimes be a little bit like crazy. Like, I feel like the worst they can do is say no. Like,
right.
I mean,
right.
What else
I totally feel you.
People are always afraid to ask, and it's like, well, if they say no, fine. But if he's not going to just offer to send me to Iceland.
Right.
So I was like, I have to ask. And so I emailed him, and literally the opening line of the email was like, I have a crazy idea, but I would like to. Could you help me go to Iceland and I'll write a thesis, undergrad thesis on it? And he was like, that's a great idea. Let me see what we can do. And he ended up getting me in contact. It was so random because he has never really done any work in Iceland, but he met a Icelandic researcher at a conference a decade ago and had their email. And so he emailed them and got them in touch with me. And so I ended up being kind of like a guest student for a day or two at University of Iceland during the eruption. And then the rest of my time there, I was able to kind of conduct my own field season, collecting samples and stuff with the intention of using it in my thesis. What ended up happening was when I got back to University of Florida after that field work, we got a set of samples from volcanic cones at the East Pacific Rise, which is a mid-ocean ridge. And while we could have definitely done work on the samples I brought back from Iceland, everybody was researching Iceland at that point because it was a really cool eruption, obviously. But so the University of Iceland had already done most of the basic geochemical work that I was capable of doing because I was an undergrad. So like I can't do the advanced stuff yet. Whereas these underwater volcanic cones had kind of been picked up just like kind of as a side project while they were doing some other work in the area. And so no one else on the planet had samples from these volcanic cones. And so we decided to do my thesis on that instead, because you're able to get much more unique research out of that, especially for an undergrad thesis. You get the opportunity to have samples like that for an undergrad thesis. So that's what we ended up doing. But that is one of the reasons why I decided to do research on Iceland for my graduate degree, which is what I'm doing now. And as far as getting started on TikTok, I did not intend for it to be a thing like it is now. When I first moved to Gainesville, it was right after the pandemic isn't over, but it was right after quarantine kind of ended, and so I didn't know anyone in the area. I had just moved there. I had also just gone through a breakup, which is always stressful, and so I was bored and I needed a creative outlet, and I was stressed from school, and so I was like, I'll just make dumb videos on the internet. Why not? So that's what I started doing. And it started pretty purely as just like dumb gay jokes. Like, I'll be honest, like there's a lot of like really silly puns in geology that make really, great gay jokes. And so that was like,
look at your name for one. I mean,
look at my name. Yeah,
exactly. Can you share one with us? Like, I totally want to hear one.
I mean, most of them have to do with dikes, obviously, for
yeah,
obvious
okay.
reasons, or the mineral coming tonight. Like,
Yes,
it's so easy.
I posted
And like
that
they write themselves, like in my petrology class, like they like very small, igneous intrusions, which are called dikes, but very small ones are called dikelets. And so I had some video that was like, I hereby declare every lesbian under 5'5" a dikelet. Like, it's just like silly stuff like that. Or like today in my tectonics class, they were talking about how, this layer is 100% dike. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, I'm 100% dike. Or he was like, yeah, these brecciated dikes are, these dikes are breaking up. And I was like, yeah, that could be really traumatic. Like in my head, like it's so easy. And so and I have a really, immature sense of humor with that. So
yeah,
I
me too.
that was, and it's fun because like I'm one of the only people in the department who can make that joke without being politically incorrect. So it's fun.
Yeah.
And so, but so that's how it started. And I had one video that I wouldn't say it went viral, but it got a lot of views. And I was all of a sudden like, like I'm gay and I like rocks. Like I bet all these gay people that follow me now like would like rocks. And so I started doing like actual lessons on like what they are, because the humor in it is kind of niche. Not everyone knows what a dike is in geology, at least. So I was like, maybe I should start explaining like what some of this stuff is, and explaining about like minerals. And I really wanted to, my account is for everyone. I love teaching everyone, but the account did start out of a desire to connect with my own community about something that gave me like a lot of meaning in my life. I came out as gay to my parents at 22, like in the same phone call that I told them I was leaving, nursing school. And so even though it seems like they wouldn't be related at all, like in my life, they've always been like very intertwined. They were both part of me deciding that I was gonna like live my life authentically, to be cheesy about it, and like accept that this is who I was and this is what I wanted. And that apparently involves being gay and looking at rocks all day. So
I think that's beautiful. Like, good for you.
I think we might have, I think you sent the video. Let me see if this is the video here.
That one was more recent. That one is my most viral one. That one has like 3.8 million views. So that one was maybe like last year. And I think I started the account in, I can't remember if it was end of 2020 or beginning of 2021. But so the one I was talking about was a bit older, but that one is my highest view video. It's one of my favorites for sure. I think it very much encapsulates my attitude towards, my field and what I do. So
I think it's really neat doing this podcast. We've had so many creators, whether it's TikTok, YouTube, that really came into their path and journey became really clear in a very crazy time, like during COVID. Like people just found themselves and found where they want to go during that crazy time. And I think that, while it was such a really rough time for everyone, it's like a beautiful thing, because I'm seeing like, hearing these stories, and I'm like, you may have had a different story if we didn't have that experience, so that's really good for you. So you were talking about Iceland. We should have some pictures, right?
We should have a lot of pictures of Iceland, I think.
So wow.
So those are Iceland, and literally the one on the left is like you had to climb up this like hill. It wasn't a crazy big hill, but it was like kind of steep, so you couldn't really see over the top of it. And also, I'll be honest, I landed in Iceland, and you have to wait for your negative COVID test to come back before you can do anything. And so I thought I wasn't going to get it back till the next morning, but I got it back in a few hours. And so I was like, I'm just going to hike the volcano tonight. What could go wrong? And so that's what I ended up doing, is I started hiking it when it was already dark out. And so I kind of got lost and went up the wrong hill and all kinds of stuff. But when I got to the top of the hill that I was not originally supposed to be hiking up, I mean, there wasn't like a real established path yet, but I took the hardest possible way. But that was the view. Like as soon as you got over the hill, like I have a video that I took going over the hill, and you hear me like huffing and puffing in the video. But I literally start like laughing and like crying a little bit, which is
Yeah.
it's all very cheesy, but I was just like, oh my god, this is an erupting, like, look at it. It's and you it was
Gorgeous.
like cold out because it's Iceland, but it was also, you could feel the heat every time it erupted. And there's this I can't remember if I sent you this picture, but one of the pictures, you can see this huge, flow of lava, glowing bright red in the dark and like going off into the distance. It was just incredible. And like, if I didn't want to be a volcanologist before that, I sure as heck did after that. I mean, I did before, but like that really solidified it. I was like, nothing else. Like, I'll do whatever I need to do to get paid to do this, like it was incredible. Yeah, it was incredible.
I had a
And
similar experience when I was in Northern Ireland. I went to Giant's Causeway, and like just going through like all of geology and learning about stuff, and then getting there, and like obviously people are like, yo, there's like a story about it and whatever, but like just getting there and just thinking about like, this is so cool, like the columnar basalts and the features and everything. And it was I was just like, holy, like it was like a different level of an experience.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. Oh yeah, so this is just like up close of the lava, but the one on the right is a photo I took when I was actually sampling with University of Iceland. The rest of the time when I was sampling on my own, I only went to the area that was like accessible to like regular people, because this was like my first major field season. I don't want to get like too excited. So I was going to the areas that you were allowed to be like as a regular, like civilian, I guess, non scientist person. But when I was with University of Iceland, we got to take, vehicles out to like the farther, like forward advancing lava flows. They don't want people normally going there because the lava flow is literally moving towards you. It's not super fast, but it's still a giant, burning hot thing of lava moving towards you. And so that's what that picture is from. On the right is they were doing hot rock sampling, which I wasn't allowed to actually do that because I was just a student, but I got to watch them do that, where they basically have this like giant like metal spoon that somebody's welded, and they stick it in the lava and collect a sample of it. I got to hold the bucket of water. That was exciting. Yeah, it had daisies on it. But so it was really cool to watch though, because, every 10 minutes we were having to move our gear back another 20 feet or whatever, because this lava flow is coming towards you. And it makes this really, like, it makes sense thinking about it now, but I wasn't expecting it. It makes this really, really cool crinkling noise, because you can see that the front part of the flow is solidified and it's basalt, so it's this hard rock, but the interior is molten and moving forward. So as the different like outer crust portions of rock are like hitting each other, and makes this crinkling noise. That's just really, really cool. It was a very, very cool experience. Yeah.
Can you just explain a little bit about like what volcanology, what is the importance of this study of volcanoes? What learning that science and everything that you're doing, what's important about that for us to learn about? Why does that help us, in the spectrum of the natural world?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things. The most obvious immediate one is volcanic hazards, which is what I was involved with when I was working at the volcano observatories. That's the most like immediately applicable thing of volcanology. As I think when you're a kid, you have this idea, you either think that volcanoes are going to be less of a problem than they really are, or you think they're going to be like a really, really big problem. And for a lot of people, they're not. But for some people, it is. Like, for example, in Alaska, we get 2 or 3 eruptions a year up there. And some of them have pretty like major effects, on the economy and on the communities that live on the Aleutian volcanic chain. And there's over 140 volcanoes there. The West Coast is very, volcanically active. And I think it's easy for people to be like, well, it doesn't erupt that often. It doesn't erupt that often on human timescales, but it erupts quite often on geological timescales, because you're talking about like the entirety of history. And like what happened with St. Helens, if you don't have plans, very good plans in place, very far ahead of time, really devastating things can happen. Mount St. Helens really jump-started the field of volcanology like in the US, because before that, volcanology was kind of just like a knowledge for knowledge's sake kind of thing, which is still very valuable. It's interesting, and we want to understand how the world works. But after Mount St. Helens, the field of volcanology really took off because people were like, oh, this can actually have really devastating effects, not only on like people's immediate lives, but also like on the economy and even on eruptions that don't. Luckily, most of the time nowadays, eruptions don't have major death tolls, but they do have pretty major effects like on the global economy, and in longer term can affect the climate. That's one of the things that's kind of related to the research I'm doing now, is the long-term effects that deglaciation can have on like the frequency of volcanic eruptions. But a different eruption in Iceland that was an explosive eruption, the ones on the Reykjanes Peninsula are effusive, so it's mostly like more liquidy lava flows and not as much ash. But there was one in 2010 that cost the global economy, it was I don't remember the exact number, but it was like millions of dollars, billions of dollars, I think. It cost the global economy a lot of money. And there's also a lot of really, really important like economic hubs located right near volcanoes, the west coast of the US being one example, but there's also a lot, in like Indonesia or the volcanoes in Italy. They're dealing with a lot of activity over there right now and potentially preparing for an evacuation. And it seems like those things would only immediately affect the people in the vicinity. But for one thing, if there's a lot of ash, it is going to affect climate to some degree. People always like to say, oh, it's going to cause an ice age. An ice age and a volcanic winter, which is the phenomenon where volcanoes, can cool things down, is a different thing. So it's not necessarily like a volcano is going to erupt and tomorrow everything's going to be covered in ice, but it does impact climate and it can impact agriculture and things like that. But the thing with us relying on technology so much now is, especially with the volcanoes in Indonesia, people would think that, oh, that's not really going to affect us. But there's so many underwater cables for like global internet, and there are so many, like transportation and supply chain hubs and stuff there, that if there were a major eruption that could shut down communications like across the globe, we could see similar shortages to supplies that we saw during the supply chain breakdown in COVID, things like that. So while most of the time, if you hear a volcano apocalypse scenario, they're not being honest with you, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have effects that have really drastic impacts on people's everyday lives, and it's something that we should be prepared for. So that's the most immediate application of volcanology. And the other application is that it's really cool and fun to know about. And so I think sometimes even research that's funded through a university, I really strongly believe that it should have a benefit to society, because NSF funds a lot of that stuff. NSF is ultimately, people's money. And then of course, if you're working federal government, that's a very direct like taxpayer money to you thing. And then NSF gets money from all kinds of different sources, which I think also includes like federal funding.
And that's the National Science Foundation, for those that are in academia.
Yeah, sorry. The National Science Foundation is what funds a lot of research. And I do believe that any research that's even sort of affiliated with that should have public benefit. But I also do think that public benefit, getting to learn really cool, exciting stuff, is also a public benefit. But that's why I think science communication is so important, because a lot of people in academia get their research paid for by essentially public funds, but they don't really care much about communicating it to anyone but their peers in very, prestigious journals that nobody except for other scientists can access. Right. And I feel like that's a disservice, because it should have some kind of public benefit. You should care enough to communicate it to the people whose funds are going to your research. So that's another reason why I'm involved in science communication, as I feel like it's not appreciated enough in the world of like academia.
Yeah. Good for you. I love that. Yeah, like love that philosophy. I mean, I totally do. I mean, I think that taxpayers want to know more. It's just, it's just cool. The available. Yeah, heck yeah. Like it's just that, people being, sharing that information.
I saw some statistic. I've tried to look it up again, so I don't know if it's true or what the numbers even are, but it was something like 70% of people after they graduate high school get their only exposure to science from the meteorologists on the news channel.
Yeah.
And it's quite honestly, like, that's how a lot of people, they just don't try to seek it out. There's nothing beyond like maybe some movie where there's a scientist in the movie or on a TV
Mhm.
show. Like
Or,
it,
like, if there's a
Yeah.
really cool podcast that talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there are, and
Yeah,
that's the great part of some of the stuff like with
social media and
just social media too.
mhm.
Like it just is bringing
Yeah.
so much more. Um, I guess the one question that kind of comes up in all this then is, you know, the big problem that I've seen in academia is not only just the nomenclature and terms and things that people have to learn to understand it,
Yeah.
but also the very literal paywall that exists to
Yeah.
access some of it. So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
there, like, I guess sort of, I don't want to say like you have control and to do whatever you want, but
I wish.
so like what
Yeah.
what are some things that you like would say to like anyone that maybe they have like a special interest about something and
Mhm.
they want to expose more people, like is like obviously there's TikTok, like is that something
Mhm.
that you've seen like is working really well, or do you have other suggestions?
I think social media and TikTok and YouTube and things like that in general are the best that we have to combat that. I do have some problems with it. My main problem with it is it's
The
completely
conspiracy?
unregulated. Yeah, well, yeah, it's completely unregulated, and not that I think there should be regulations or like, but I'm the only person I've ever seen who put citations in the caption of their videos or in their link tree or things like that. And so a lot of the times you end up with, and there are very very good content creators out there, obviously, but I think it's silly to think that the general public is going to know how to tell a genuine well-researched content creator from one who's not, and they're all making content. So that's
Right.
like my main issue with it is a lot of the times the SciComm on TikTok and YouTube and things like that is actually people just going to like a random Forbes article that is, well, maybe not to call out Forbes, a random
Right.
newspaper article that is maybe well-meaning but still very inaccurate,
Right.
and using that as their source and not going to actual scientific sources or things like that. And
Scholarly
so
literature, yeah.
yeah, which is it's too bad, and I think that it's a problem with the system, but I also think that TikTok is the best we have, and it's one of the reasons why I wish that there was more back and forth between people who do SciComm and people who are scientists, or that scientists were given the ability to do more SciComm. Some scientists do wish to do a lot more SciComm, but it's difficult to do SciComm and do science as someone who has been, working full time as, a volcano observatory and is now in a PhD program. It's done mostly for free and it's all extra work. And I think it's important, and that's why I do it. But it's not part of your regular job.
Right.
I can't imagine, I wouldn't have time to do it if I had a family or all kinds of other things that I had to do. And it's not, in many areas, it's not considered a positive thing to do. It's sometimes, especially if you lump into it like the social activism part that I do,
Right.
they will kind of view it as like, well, you're not serious enough about science to really be a scientist or a researcher because you are devoting so much of your time to these other things. So that's one of the problems, is the people who are the experts are discouraged from communicating it to anyone but their peers because that will lead to more publications. So that's what they care about. And then people who do purely SciComm often feel like they are not received well by people in
Right.
academia in general because of that same attitude.
Yeah.
So there tends to be very little crossover. But if there's very little crossover between the experts and the people communicating the science, that's where you end up with all this misinformation, even from
Yeah.
people who are trying really hard to produce good content. There are some things you just can't know unless you've spent decades studying
Yes.
it.
Yes.
So
Thank
it's
you.
a
Can we
very
say that again?
yeah,
Because that's
yeah,
a very important
yeah,
thing in science. And I love how there's all these experts, but I'm
yeah,
sorry, it doesn't matter like how much you independently look up stuff unless
yeah,
you're actually like, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you said it perfectly. Like, and we
yeah,
need to respect the people that actually
yeah,
do take the time to learn, and
hmm,
not just to learn, but to learn to teach.
yeah,
That's such an important aspect in science. And when you're it's talking about, you mentioned kind of some challenges and struggles.
hmm,
I wanted to ask you, in your journey that you've had, just from starting from undergrad to where you're at now, can you share some of the struggles or challenges that you've had as being a woman in
Mm-hmm.
the field of geology, and even being a woman a part of the LGBTQ community? Like, and if you could share some of those challenges, and
Yeah.
maybe some things that you've done to overcome those challenges to maybe help other people that are also in the science field.
Yeah. Uh, the number one challenge is going to be just the general attitude from some people in science and academia and geology. I feel like geology is I obviously love geology. I think it's a wonderful field. It's done a lot for me, and I plan on spending my entire life in it. But I think it is like kind of the last big holdout of like the good old boys club in science. Geology is full of people who don't like other people, who wanted to be alone in the woods with their rocks for their whole life.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I also think that we're kind of bad. We're especially bad at SciComm. We're the worst at SciComm. We're generally the worst at SciComm and the worst at these social initiatives and the worst at anything that isn't the rocks. And that just kind of tends to be the kind of people that go into geology. And I think that's why, because of that, you end up with this kind of holdout of more traditional mentality, even not even just in academia. Also, like, think about the fields you associate with industry. Oil and mining. Do those sound like super friendly fields to like women and gay people, or people of color, or any of that?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I have met, I'm always worried that people who I've worked with before will, see an interview or something and think that I think negatively of them. I have had some wonderful interactions with people who I would trust with my life in this field. It's one of the reasons why I've stayed, is because I have been able to find people who are really clearly so invested in my success. But I've also had people who I would never feel safe doing field work with ever again. Both because of me being a woman, and also because of views that they expressed that, in my opinion, conveyed kind of a hatred for the LGBTQ community in general. And I have also witnessed, like friends and colleagues who had very unpleasant experiences, especially with regards to them, being a woman or being queer. Comments that I've gotten, on videos have probably subjected me to even more of it directly, because people will say anything when it's online. I've been told many times that, like, there's no way that I can take this LGBTQ stuff seriously and actually be like considered like a scientist. Like, there's no way I can succeed in science doing that. Or a very common sentiment still is that women can't do field work. I've had friends who have literally been asked, like, who wanted to be field geologists, who are women, and who have been asked, like, how does your boyfriend feel about your doing field work? Like, is he going to let you do field work? Like, I dare them to ask me.
Yeah.
I dare them to ask me so that I can say, oh, my girlfriend is fine with it. They won't know what to do. Like, not that she would say no anyway, but it's just like, it's just too bad. It's just too bad.
Yeah, it really is.
That's the situation you're dealing with it. And I also feel like I get kind of a weird perspective on it, being someone who is sometimes very masculine presenting. Sometimes, like, I have very feminine, like, bone structure, so I can only do so much. But sometimes I dress feminine, and sometimes I dress masculine. And there is a very, like, clear distinction, and I feel like the respect I get if the first time I meet someone I was dressed masculine, or the first time I meet someone I was dressed feminine. It's this very weird position to be in, because it's like, okay, in the outside of science, you are punished for not being feminine enough. But within science, you're punished for being too feminine. So it's like there's no winning. And quite frankly, I think in some ways, at least for the sexism aspect of it, I think that it's worse for colleagues of mine who are very feminine than for me, because I tend to dress more masculine. And if they see me like that from the beginning, they assume that I can, be part of the boys' club. You're like one of the boys, Yeah, exactly. And like, I feel like the sexism is in many ways far more pervasive in the areas that I've worked in, because I'm very strategic about where I take jobs, than necessarily the homophobia. But I know that is not the case if I were to take jobs in, some of the places like I grew up. I grew up with a very distinct idea that I could not be a lesbian and be successful. Like, those were mutually exclusive options. That's and so, Yeah, but now I'm very careful about where I take jobs, and I do think that's one way that people can protect themselves. But
Yeah.
I also think that it's kind of an oversimplification, because I've had people say to me like, "Oh, well, if they won't take you as you are, you don't want to work there anyway." I am in a fortunate enough position that I can do that, but many people are not in a position where they can turn down a job. They're not in a position where they can move out of their, small rural town with very
Mhm.
negative prejudiced views against their community. And one thing that's been even more eye-opening than like my own experience was I've kind of made myself known as someone who supports the community within science. And so a lot of people will, DM me and confide in me their experiences. And some of
Yeah.
them, I'm not going to retell them because they're not my stories, but some of them are horrifying.
Yeah.
People have been like chased out of STEM essentially, or chased out of geology, especially with the importance of fieldwork in geology, which I think is something people often don't think about. But with fieldwork in geology, especially, you're going to often very remote, very dangerous locations, and you are very dependent on other people for your safety. And so, depending on the environment, there can be a
Yeah.
very strict
Yeah.
don't ask, don't tell mentality
Yeah.
about being gay, because if they don't like you for any reason, the split second hesitation that they might have when you're in trouble and you need help can cost
Yeah.
you your life. And
Right.
I did an oceanographic expedition last year, and I was really, really nervous about it because I've heard a lot of horror stories about oceanographic expeditions. Because think about it, you're with a group of people you've never met before in international waters. What could go wrong? And so I was very nervous, but this is what I want to do with my life. I love, the ocean, this mid-ocean ridge. That's what I wanted to do. But I was very nervous because I'd heard so many horror stories. I had a really great experience. But I had a really great experience because I was very careful about who I went with. The person who was my boss on it was a former student of my undergraduate advisors. I talked with all of them extensively about my concerns about this. I happened to figure out that I did a lot of online sleuthing, and I found out that the brother-in-law of, one of my bosses was gay, and I was like, it's probably okay. But even then, I did not come out to the other people on the expedition until I knew them well enough to be comfortable doing that. And that's something that I do anytime I start a new job, even if they seem great. My job at AVO, I don't think I officially came out to people for several months. And that was actually quite early for me. I've had jobs where I have waited until a year into the job to come out
Mm.
because the subject just never came up and I didn't know how they felt. I came out much earlier than usual because they were very proactive about, DEIA stuff. And I was like, okay, I think they're fine. But you never know. And especially if you've grown up in an area where that was a very real concern, you tend to be a little more hyper aware of that
Yeah.
being a possibility. And combining that, I even in times when I've lived in cities, I lived in Orlando during the Pulse shooting of the gay nightclub, and I had a friend who was, there. So I'm very hyper aware of the consequences of hatred. People think like, oh well, they just don't like you. It's like it can be a lot more intense than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So
Have you seen the video or the movie, sorry, called Picture a Scientist? It came
yes,
out in 2020. Yeah.
yes,
So
yeah,
if anyone is wanting to learn more about firsthand about what women can go through and possible
yeah,
field work, I forgot her name, but her stories of being out in the field and having her male advisor throw rocks at her while she's trying to go to the
Mm.
bathroom, to where
yeah,
she stopped going to the bathroom and had kidney problems, the kind of
yeah,
stuff, the harassment, it's
yeah,
unbelievable. And the fact that it's still happening in different places today. I remember being in my undergraduate and having a friend, and this was probably 2008 or so, and had a friend who she was flat out told, you're not going to make it as a geologist because you're a
yeah,
woman. And
yeah,
it's, just hearing that kind of stuff, it's, I think a lot of people just don't experience it. You had a good quote in one of the things I was listening to earlier today. I'm paraphrasing, but you said you're talking about, I think it was your experience about being feminine and field work and
mhm,
different expectations. And you said, it's not everyone's experience, but because it's not everyone's experience, you don't know that it's there, and then the people that do experience might be afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think that's, it's such an important thing to think about, that people need to just realize that everyone's experience is different, and that we
Yeah.
need to be more open to even just hearing people talk about their experiences.
Yeah, and that's something that's kind of comes up more than is ideal even within like the LGBT community or among other women, is if that's not their experience, they say, oh, well, that doesn't happen anymore. And that's not how it works. And like I have had negative experiences, but I have not had the most negative experiences you could possibly have, because I'm in a like I said, I'm in a privileged enough position that I can be picky at this point. I haven't always, but most of my worst experience were actually in pre-med, we're not in geology. So I'm able to be picky, but not everyone is. And I'm very aware of the fact that a lot of people have these really like traumatic, horrible, life-changing experiences that not only cost them like, you know, mental health and things like that, but cost them their dream career. Like
Right.
if I would be so angry if someone like ruined this career for me because like I love it so much. And so I think that's important, is that even I can't speak to an experience I haven't had necessarily, but I have a very large platform and I know that these issues are an issue and a big one. And even if my negative experiences are not quite as severe as other people experience, it still deserves talking about, and I can still serve as, I guess, like amplification of the stories that I have been told, because it's a pretty real problem. And it is something I might have to deal with one day. I would really love to go on Antarctic expeditions. That's something I've always wanted to do. Erebus is like a volcano with an open lava lake, and it's like in Antarctica, and it's covered in ice around it. It's so cool, and I've always wanted to do something, you know, related to that. And then there's also the oceanographic expedition to get out there. I don't know if you guys have read anything about what Antarctic expeditions are like for women, but it got so bad that in Australia, or I don't know if it was Australia or New Zealand, but they considered no longer sending female scientists because the rates of sexual harassment or assault were so incredibly high.
Wow.
And you're so
Wow.
isolated, and there's nothing you can do. And it's a
Ugh.
huge issue. And so it's the kind of thing where like I do spend probably an unreasonable amount of time sitting here thinking, what am I going to do if one day, you know, that's what stands between me and my dream career? Or especially now that I have such a large platform and I'm pretty well known for being a lesbian, which was not part of my, it's not that I didn't think about it. I didn't think anybody would care this much about my little rock account. But so now I'm so well known for being the gay geologist. And so the information that I am out, that I'm gay, is no longer in my control. And it's like, I still think it's worth it. I still do it, but it
Yeah.
makes me nervous quite often, because what if one day my dream job is in the hands of someone who doesn't like lesbians? I'm just not getting the job.
Yeah, and
I don't know. I don't
will
think that
say,
you're a force to be reckoned with. I think what you're doing is
Yeah.
is needed and so powerful that I mean, we need people like you. Like seriously.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think the other thing that I remember seeing, I think you were with the USGS. I can't quite remember, but
Yeah.
you had posted a video how they had pride flags like pins,
Yes. Yeah.
and I think like that's one of the things that you know is important about this is like
Yeah.
not necessarily trying to like push it out there, or like some people are
Mhm.
like, you're trying to shove it in my face or whatever,
Yeah.
but like just making it a normal part of the
yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like it shouldn't be a special thing that they want to have a pride pin, or like I'm wearing my
Yeah.
Twins jersey because the Twins just
Yeah.
beat the
Exactly.
Blue Jays, but you know they have
Yeah.
pride nights, and you know there's a whole, the sports thing is a whole other toxic masculinity
Yeah.
conversation. But I think, you know, for, you know, companies or organizations or government agencies just to say,
Yeah.
you know, one's not better than the other or anything, and we're not doing this because of something, we're doing it because it's
Yeah.
what it should be. People should just be
Yeah.
accepted, and we're just
Mhm.
showing that people can just be who they want to be. And I think that also just comes to then also people being able to freely say who they are. And I think
Right.
that's a
Yeah.
big part of like your content then, is being able to
Yeah.
say without fear
Here.
of, you know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, some
Definitely.
kind of consequence basically from it, but just being able to say, you know, you're queer or you're gay or,
Yeah.
you know, whatever label you want to choose, and then that's it, that's you. Like it
Yeah.
should just be something like someone explained, you know, like someone was talking about like gender terms, and it was kind of like, you
Mhm.
know, we all probably know someone in our life who goes by a middle name, and that's
Mhm.
not their name, that's what they want you to call them,
Yeah.
and people don't have a problem with that. And that's how it should be with everything.
Right.
Someone says, hey,
Yeah.
I want to be addressed as this, or I am this way. And people go, okay. And then that's
Right.
it. And yeah, and I think just that exposure, in its own way is doing something. Hopefully, if
Yeah.
it's not doing something to people immediately, it's at least showing people, you know, that you can be a lesbian
Yeah.
and a scientist. Because I know I do want to show one of your videos, because you did mention that like you didn't think that like lesbians could be
Yeah.
scientists. So I do want to show, you did have one video about that. So let me just show that quick.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah.
And that's just
Yeah.
one. I know you've got multiple
Yeah.
videos like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's a series I do in partnership with OSTEM, which is out in STEM. It's like a LGBTQ professional organization, and it's definitely one that's very close to my heart because, like I said, you never learn about any of that, and people are always like, well, why does it matter that they were gay? And it's like, well, because we spend so much time being told that we can't be those things, and yet here's all these people that were those things and did it successfully. So that's why it's important that we know that. Yeah.
Representation is very important.
Yeah.
Representation and feeling a sense of like, you know, when someone's was going through identity and trying to figure out their place in the world. And a large part of that is, you know, seeing where you feel like you belong. And if we all need to work to live, right? And it's like you're picking a career. And if you don't feel that who you are as a person meshes or feels like they belong there, and that's something you're passionate about, like that's incredibly unfortunate. And so that's where representation becomes really important, where people can feel like they have a place where they can just be themselves and still do the job that they enjoy or want to do. So I think very highly of what you're doing within, you know, activism and pulling it all together in what you do as a profession. Which, talking about as a profession real quick, I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
And Ben, we can probably pull up one of the pictures I have of her. You were on a boat. I wanted to talk a bit, not specifically what you're doing, but with your underwater exploration. And kind of tell us the importance of underwater. Yeah, there we go. Tell us the importance of underwater exploration and being a marine geologic contractor. Like, how do we benefit that as in the natural world and you doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So as far as like the mid-ocean ridge stuff, I think it's easy to think of that as like really disconnected from like anything that happens up here on the surface. But mid-ocean ridges are actually kind of the foundation for like life in the oceans. The majority of like iron in the ocean's, you know, chemical makeup is provided by mid-ocean ridge systems. That iron is used by plankton and phytoplankton, things like that, which is a lot of animals eat. So it's kind of one of the bases of like the food chain, for one thing. And then also a lot of like submarine volcanoes have a lot of minerals, like you've probably seen hydrothermal vents and things like that. That's another place that a lot of the minerals that make up our ocean and, you know, the chemical makeup of our ocean is impacted by that, which then impacts what happens at the surface, because there's no life without oceans, right? We've been trying to find it, but we haven't found it yet. So that's one thing that's very foundational. And then with the geologic contractor thing, the main thing I do there is like environmental surveys, which is essentially just learning about the environment at the bottom of the ocean. And especially with, you know, we're in a world wrestling with climate change and things like that. And we really need to understand those cycles. There's carbon cycles in the ocean. There's these life cycles in the ocean and the food chain and all those other things. So if you think of it at face value, I think it does seem very disconnected. And there's definitely some of it that, like any area of research, could be considered research for research sakes. But it is also very foundational to how our Earth's crust and how our world has formed, which really impacts everything. If you think about it, you know, long enough, it connects to so many different things.
So with that, with talking about volcanoes underwater or just even above water, I have a specific question about gold.
Okay,
There
I
is
don't know much about gold, but I'll do my best.
I was gonna
Okay.
say too, speaking of underwater, that is a new sort of emerging field of underwater mining, um,
Yes.
which, yeah, but I'll let you talk about
Yeah.
Yeah,
gold.
yeah, yeah. So there's this kind of debate that I've seen online about like the origins of gold. And so I mean, we know that there is gold in
Mhm.
volcanoes, where they're
Mhm.
finding it. So, but there are people who think that maybe that gold was it's extraterrestrial. Like, what are your thoughts on gold? Is that something that is it part of our natural planet, or is maybe from other means of becoming here? And I don't know how it got into our volcanoes, but like,
Yeah.
how what is the connection between gold and volcanoes?
So I know that they've been found in volcanic systems, but I don't actually know. That's not an area that I've ever done any research on. The only association I really have with gold is, like the hydrothermal formation, like the typical way they form. So I'm actually not a great person to answer that question. I know they exist in volcanoes, but I don't know the mechanisms by which they would form from it. I think that's a pretty ongoing area of research, to be honest.
Okay, okay, that's
Yeah,
fair. That's fair. I know I
yeah.
hear a lot of debate about it, and I just thought maybe I'd ask what your ideas were on that. What were you going to ask, Ben? You were talking about underwater.
Oh, I was just mentioning, there is a lot that has been, sort of this expanding field as part of sort of the economic
Mhm.
geology about there's been a lot of research. I mean, I know some of it has been like editorialized because they're looking for other places to mine, and they've
Yeah.
started looking at like asteroids as like a
Mhm.
mining possibility of even, people have even talked about like redirecting an asteroid to get it closer to get the minerals and
Mhm.
the resources from it. But I know, like, there's been a lot of talk about sort of underwater
Yeah.
mining and how it's, possible. And there is a lot. And, some of it is, unfortunately coming down to climate change because
Yeah.
there is a lot of, things that we need to look at, not only just of like from mining perspective, but also how do we deal with the way that we operate in the world of doing like carbon sequestration and different things of
Mhm.
and even, yeah, I worked in the oil field for a while, and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
you have all the spent frack water. What do you do with it? Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to inject it into the ground, and then all of a sudden, okay, now we're causing earthquakes because we're injecting water. Um, so there's all those things that, I guess not necessarily deal with volcanology, but geology and, in general, that is, sort of important that I think people need to understand as part of
Yeah.
just science in general, that we need to fund these things.
Yeah.
And also just, I think people need to be open to facts and things that
Mhm.
might not jive with what they maybe even grew up with.
Yeah.
The big thing that sticks out in my head, I know you've done a lot on like Yellowstone volcanoes
Mhm.
and things, but
Yeah.
like when it came out that NASA or whoever the deciding factor was that they were going to remove Pluto as a planet, and the uproar of people saying, I was told this as a child,
Yeah.
Pluto is a planet, and I don't care what the scientists say, it's still a planet to me.
Yeah.
It's that same kind of
Yeah.
thing of like, you might
Yeah.
see some content creator on TikTok that you love or YouTube or
Mhm.
whatever it is, and they have no scientific background, they spread their ideas, but if they say, the Yellowstone volcano is going to erupt soon, I think I sent you a video of when I was in college, there was someone that
Mhm.
was saying, because there was a big earthquake swarm.
Yeah.
And as people who know something about volcanoes might know that there's usually a lot of earthquakes when it's about to
Right.
erupt,
Right. Yeah.
but it's also just a just normal part of the Yellowstone system. And they were
Yeah.
basically saying it's going to
Yeah.
erupt. And
Yeah.
they're causing all this fear and people are getting upset. But I think the important thing for people to understand in that situation, one is what is your source? And
Mhm.
two, I think people need to stop being lazy and find
Yeah.
actual scientific sources. And it might be a reputable newspaper. Hopefully, journalism isn't dying and we can have people that actually go out and can
Mhm.
have those sources that can say it. But it's really
Mhm.
important, I think, and you might be that person to someone because they know, oh,
Yeah.
Mount
Mhm.
Etna is erupting. who can I talk
Yeah.
to about like if it's a serious thing, or maybe we will get more earthquake swarms in Yellowstone or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to have access to that information. And I know I saw some video you were talking about someone, I think they were with I forgot which volcano observatory it was, but you were talking to them about the alerts that they send out and
Yeah.
how
Was it
like
Mike, maybe? The Yellowstone Volcano Observatory scientist in charge. I think he's the main person I've interviewed on that.
yeah, it might have been that, or it might have been like the Cascades. I can't remember, but
Okay.
the big takeaway I remembered from it was you have a bunch of scientists that are trying to convey
Mhm.
information to the public, and they're treating the public like scientists. So I
Yeah,
guess
but yeah. So that was something I have had conversations with multiple people who I've worked with at the observatories, and is something that they're currently trying to work on. There are a lot of people who care about it. One of the problems with working in science so long is when you're in this little bubble and surrounded by only people who know everything about, geophysics all day, you forget that a normal person doesn't know what seismicity means. Like a non-geologist doesn't necessarily know that. And so that was one area in which like my science communication work ended up branching over into my professional job. And I guess to most people it seems like, oh, those are the exact same thing. But because of me being so openly lesbian on my account, like I said, I traditionally have tried to keep those things very separated, but I ended up kind of being in a position where I felt like everybody could really benefit from me kind of crossing those two things together, because I made a series. I make a lot of content about volcanoes in the U.S. for one thing, but I made a whole series based on the USGS volcanic risk assessment. And it was like a countdown of, I think, the top 21 or something, like most dangerous volcanoes in the U.S. as ranked by different parameters by the volcano observatories and USGS. And I do think it's very important that people have an accessible source for things. However, when it comes to things like emergency response, I don't like people coming to me and saying, is this dangerous enough for me to evacuate? I don't want that kind of responsibility. This is also not my main job. I can't necessarily stop, all this stuff I'm doing for my PhD every time there's an eruption to go protect. Like, it's too much that I can't do it. So I like making content about eruptions and things like that. But when people start asking me about safety things, I refer them to an official source. I think that is the best way to do it. I don't think that I or anyone else on social media should want to be in a position where you're in control of people's safety, because there's a reason why people are paid full time to do that. And we just do not have, even me who is currently working in a volcano observatory, I do not have access to the emergency information on an eruption in Mexico. There was an eruption in Mexico, and I was getting, messages being like, what do I do? And I had to be like, you go to this website where your government safety agency tells you what to do.
Right.
I am just not
correct. Yeah.
For everyone's sake, I'm not going to do that. But what was happening is when I was making this volcanic risk assessment series is I like to refer people to the USGS volcanic alerts, because you can stay up, especially if you like live next to Rainier or something, you want to do that. But what was happening is people were getting these volcanic alerts, they're checking the volcanic updates, and I was getting messages in the hundreds being like, can you explain the update? Or can you, and I went and actually looked at them. And I was like, I don't think these are actually written for the public. And so I stopped recommending them to people. But then when I actually got a job at a volcano observatory, some people were talking about it over lunch, and I was like, wait, those are for the public?
I didn't even realize.
I do. Sorry. I was just gonna say, have you ever read the comic XKCD? Do you know of it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I just want to show you one quick comment because it is completely relevant to this.
Okay.
So if you can't read it, it says, it's for average familiarity. It says, silicate chemistry is second nature to us geochemists. It's easy to forget that the average person probably only knows the formulas for olivine and one or two feldspars. And then the other person says, and quartz, of course. Oh, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the bottom it says, even when they're trying to compensate for it, experts in anything will wildly overestimate the average person's familiarity with their field.
Yes.
And I think it's one of
Yeah.
those perfect things as like, geologists might think, well, everyone knows quartz and feldspars and, whatever. But in reality, it's not
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the conversation ended up being, is realizing, they think that these are accessible to the public, and they put a lot of effort into writing them. They really want them to be accessible to the public. They don't, people are more likely to leave a comment on my random video than they are to email the USGS about how inaccessible their, stuff is. And so I was like, I think I should be telling them about these hundreds of comments I'm getting saying that this is inaccessible, because I think that if they're going to put that much work into it, they want it to be accessible. And that was something that we ended up conversing at length about, because there's apps that you can do. I think one of them is called like the Hemingway app, where you copy and paste your text into the Hemingway app, and it tells you the grade level, the reading level of your text. And I showed them a couple examples.
Nice.
Where I copy and pasted their volcanic alert, and it was like college level reading. And
maybe you need to be a part of like their team. Like,
so one of them actually suggests, I don't know how it would work, but one of my friends there did actually suggest that. However, I wonder how that would work for me in particular, given that I don't know, I'm so vocal about like social activism. They do have very strict rules about like being politically aligned publicly working for the federal government. Right. So I don't know how that would work, but I do think that it should
be too bad, because you'd be the best person for it.
Thank you. I'm pretty good at it too. But I think, that's with the Hemingway app or things like that, that's also it's a good way to check yourself and not have to, because if you check with other scientists or the geophysicist next door, he probably thinks it sounds great. And there were some things that, I'm a geochemist, not a geophysicist, and there were some things in the alerts that even I was kind of like, I don't really know what that means. And I work there.
You should really push them to start doing like Twitter, like the National Park Service has doing. I don't know if you've been following them, but they basically, like their wit and jokes about everything. Like, and it seems like that's also, just some of the ways to make it, more relevant to the public.
And I agree with that. But another thing that kind of comes into play is like, different volcano observatories have different resources when it comes to that stuff. Yellowstone, ironically, has such little like activity above background that they have all kinds of free time at, the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory. So they have the Yellowstone Caldera Chronicles, like articles they put out. They do all kinds of social media stuff about Yellowstone because they only have one volcano to worry about, and it's not really that active above baseline ever anyway. Whereas, the Alaska Volcano Observatory or the Cascades Volcano Observatory, they have so many more volcanoes. They have so much more activity that could potentially be something, that would lead to something that they're interested in. They don't have the time or resources to do these intense social media campaigns. And because generally science communication is not valued as its own job, that just hasn't happened. Now, I don't think it was the Alaska Earthquake Center, I think, had a posting a couple months ago for a full-time science communication position. And I thought that was so cool because I have like never really heard of that. But I think that that's something that's important. Is I think a better model, than the science just existing and us relying on random independent contractor content creators to interpret it correctly, is to make science communication a valued and integral part of research agencies. And that is not the norm right now, but I think it should be, because I think that's the number one way to make sure the right information is getting communicated, and also that more people can go into science communication. I think only for like 6 months or so was I doing science communication full time while I was between jobs, but it's people can do it well. People can do it well, but there's an inherent risk in having to take content based on what will pay you the most and get you the most views. Even someone who is very, very well-meaning, if this video is how you're paying your rent, it's very tempting to say what will get you the most money. And I don't think that not saying that everyone is like, lie or anything like that, but there's a built-in there's a built-in risk to that is not the case if you're literally hired by a research organization to communicate their research correctly and effectively. And so, I think right now, independent contracting and independent SciComm is very important. I think it will always have a place, but I do think that for everyone's sake, it should be a valued and integrated part of research. And it's not currently. It's kind of something that, some people do because they think it's important and everybody else is kind of annoyed with. It's like, well.
Right.
So
that would be a nice change for the future, though. Like in science, it would be incredible, and
and it is working. It is getting there, just slowly, like everything.
So we've gone on for about an hour. Do you have some more time?
Yeah, I have some more time. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. There were some things I do want to do a little bit of a left turn. So I'm not going to ask you your favorite mineral because it's garnet.
But I am.
It's garnet. Spoiler alert. Because I do my research. Her favorite mineral is garnet.
But the world doesn't know.
Her second favorite is kyanite. I know second favorite is kyanite. And her favorite rock is a mid-ocean ridge basalt.
You went way back.
Okay, the people watching don't know. So, Denali, please share with us.
So we've got garnets, kyanite, mid-ocean ridge basalt. So explain why those are your favorites.
So kyanite was my first favorite before I really knew much about geology, and kyanite is actually where the name Dykanite came from. Dyke plus kyanite. Dyke plus my favorite mineral, my favorite geology word plus my favorite mineral. So that's where that came from. And if you've seen kyanite, it's like blue and it's got these like cool blades on it. I just thought it was awesome.
And it glows red. It glows red under long wave. It's gorgeous.
It's really, really cool. But then once I started getting actually into my geology classes, my favorite color is maroon. So there's one thing towards garnet. I actually used to think my favorite color was blue, but I don't really own any blue. And everything I own, with the exception of this shirt, ironically, is like pretty much either black or maroon. And I dated someone once who was like, no, your favorite color is maroon. And I was like, you can't tell me what my favorite color is. But then I thought about it. And I looked around and I was like, maroon sweater, like maroon bed, maroon lamp, maroon. I was like, oh, my favorite color is maroon. So that's one of the reasons I love garnet, is because it's maroon. I really love any minerals with like a really unique, shape, and they have the octahedral shape. I think that's really, really cool. And they also form in like a really neat way, and they're associated with metamorphism, which I think is cool. And then also the way they look under thin section, if you slice them and look at them under a microscope, they're just black. And most of them you turn like different colors or like things like that, but they just become completely black. No light can like get through it at all. And I've made videos about it, or I'm like, this little soulless void is a garnet, and I am also a soulless void, or something. I don't know. It's just, I just like it. Yeah, it's a good opportunity for jokes also, which I like. But then mid-ocean ridge basalt is just because like, it was the thing that, got me into everything. It got me started on, and I mean, technically that's a rock, not a mineral, but like it got me started in everything. And also it's ocean floor rock. Like, it's from like 4,000, meters. Like, it's the bottom of the ocean. It's so cool. It's from an underwater volcano.
Oh, yes.
That rock.
So what is this rock? What is this, and where is it from?
Yeah.
This is a mantle xenolith.
Oh.
And a xenolith, that basically means it's a rock that is in place, that is put somewhere that was taken from somewhere else. So lava will be coming up, and it'll grab a piece of rock and it'll carry it, up somewhere. And so it's a different composition than the surrounding rock, basically, from a completely different place. And a mantle xenolith is just a piece of the Earth's mantle that was picked up in the process of a volcanic eruption, coming through the Earth. And it just picked it up along its way and brought it to the surface. And so this is from the Iceland eruption that I went to. And it's literally like a piece of Earth's mantle from like way, way down deep that's just like chilling at the surface in this lava rock. It's just so cool. And it's beautiful. Olivine is the green mineral in there, and I think olivine is just gorgeous also. I collected one of one of the jobs I got to help with when I was with University of Iceland that day, as we were going around collecting mantle xenoliths so they could analyze them for their geochemistry. And I really wanted to find one and, like, you know, be helpful. And so I found this one, and this was the biggest one we found all day. And I was so proud. And he, like, asked for it so that he could put it in the bag with ones to analyze. And I swear I was going to, but I was like, it's so pretty and it's so big. And so I was like staring at it, and he was like, "You want to keep it, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Like, of course.
And he was like, "Fine." But I felt bad because I could tell you know, you have to crush up so many little xenoliths to get enough to analyze. And I could tell he was like, "Man, that was such a nice, good one to analyze." But I kept it. It's one of my favorite ones.
So, being a geologist, I know you have a bunch of rocks, and I don't want to go through like your whole favorites and whatever. The one question that I'm curious about, which I don't know if you can answer right away, what are your youngest rock and oldest rock that you have?
I actually can answer those right away.
Okay.
My youngest rock is going to be these ones from Iceland in 2021. There have been eruptions since then, but I haven't gotten to go to the other ones. So these are the youngest rocks that I have, as they're from 2021. And then the oldest rock I have is, I don't have it out right now, but the oldest rock I have is from the Archean. And it's from a random, like, road crop in, I can't remember if it was Tennessee or Michigan or somewhere, during field camp. And we during undergrad, we did a fieldwork camp, and we just pulled over on the side of the road, and he was like, "Yeah, this rock's like from the Archean. It's so old." And it was like this outcrop of rock on the side of the road with graffiti on it. And I was just like, people passing this rock have no idea. This is like one of the oldest rocks.
Yeah, I think about that all the time because I've got some banded iron.
Yeah.
And that's another one that it's, you know, the really old. I just had to ask because I was curious if you had grabbed anything that was like freshly made while you were in Iceland.
Do you still get out and collect and just have fun just looking for rocks in random places?
Yeah.
Like, do you? Okay.
Yeah. I'm a big rock hound.
So you're a rock hound too. Okay. Because there's a geologist and a rock hound.
Yeah,
so I'm like, do you like get out there and just like, I want to find rocks?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was about to say, like, I figured that all geologists would be rock hounds, but like that's not true. And I've met a couple of geologists that don't have like any rocks at all, and I'm just like, I don't trust you. Like, there's something wrong with that.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, but I'm definitely a rock hound, and anytime I had to drive from Alaska to where I'm currently in grad school, and I planned an extra like 5 or 6 days so I could stop along the way and find some
I love
cool
that,
things. So yeah, I hold on to rocks that really like for example, outside of one of my apartments in Florida, a piece of the curb broke off in the parking lot. And I was like, I'm going to keep this one. This will be a memory of my apartment in college. So I literally have a piece of a curb like in my rock collection. So
that's great. You should look up. I got them. I was at I think it was an AAPG conference, Association of American Petroleum Geologists. And they had for sale, I think they still have them like online, but they have road maps that you can get of different sections of the country, and they have the geology on the road map. So you can like open up to like the western part and you're driving through Montana, and it'll say like, oh, this is like the, whatever igneous batholith you're driving through or whatever. Those are really cool.
Nice. Yeah.
Which, yeah,
awesome.
I've got so many roadside geology books.
Yeah, they're good books.
yeah, and it's always amazing to me too. Like in Minnesota, like I'll go to like there's a waterfall that it's called Gooseberry Falls. It's on the North Shore of Lake Superior. It's really cool from a geology standpoint, which I didn't realize until I went there and actually bought a Minnesota geology book. It's got columnar basalts, and that's actually what like the waterfall's going over. It's not well defined, but if you know what to kind of look for, you can kind of see them. But it's always interesting because I'll go into the visitor center and they'll have like a whole, obviously there's like the Lake Superior agate collecting like books and whatever, but there's always like Minnesota geology books, and just seeing like the general public that they just want to know more information. And it's always like, yeah, like someone else on the right team wants to know more about the Earth.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Bowen's reaction series, overrated or essential?
I feel like it's essential for learning. I think it's like it's one of those. I think it's one of those like the subduction zones. The model that they teach about subduction zones where the plates collide and it just goes like that. Like it violates basic mass balance principles. Like we know that that's not exactly how it goes, but it's the best model we have, and you kind of have to. It's hard because you have to kind of teach like something that's a tiny bit of a lie when they can't understand, like when you're not at the level to understand the more advanced stuff, because it's just so much. So that's kind of how I feel about Bowen's reaction series. Is it's necessary to get started, and then you learn more about the nuances later.
I remember.
Because I was going to say I'm at the Bowen stage, so I'm glad that you said that, because I'm like that's how I started learning to understand.
I remember. So I actually got very lucky in high school and was able to take an earth science class, which it ended up being like an elective like class, and I can't remember how I ended up working it out. It was one of those like I only had to take 2 years of Spanish, and I took it like sophomore, junior. So I had a senior year that I could take something else. I took earth science, which was great. But I do like one of the big things that I remember learning that stuck with me that I later learned was false was the whole concept about like magma being, or oil even being in these pools. And it's just this open cavity, and that's what's filled underneath the earth. And then I actually start learning. It's like, well, there's porosity in rocks and, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
it's more like a mush. It's more like a bunch of different, sills and areas of mush of magma than there's not like a giant, chamber of liquid in the crust.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just one of those that like, it can get you interested and you learn sort of the very basics. There's liquid under the ground, but totally. Okay, I did have a bunch more videos I did want to show.
Okay.
I do want to show this one because I do have tattoos. I don't have any geology tattoos, but you did send a video about tattoos, so I do want to play this one.
Let's see that one.
For those that didn't see it, it's
that's so
a
sick.
Topographic map.
It's sick.
Is it that volcano then?
Yeah, it's that volcano in Iceland. Yeah. I knew that I wanted a topo map for a while. I just didn't know what I wanted it of. I thought about getting a topo map of Denali. Like my first name is Denali. I thought about getting a topo map of Denali, but I was like, nah, that seems a little like self-centered. I'm not going to do that. So I was like waiting for something like really good, and then I was like, this is like a life-changing moment for me. This is what I'm going to get. So,
what a gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and that map that you showed earlier is what the reference for the tattoo was. So that was another thing that kind of inspired it. Is it's not just like a regular topo map. It's a topo map with these shaded regions representing like the thickness in different areas of the new lava. And for one thing, that makes for like really good, contrast and stuff in a tattoo. But it's also just really cool because like, even since I went, there's been other eruptions. So it doesn't, it's not exactly the same as it was when I was there, but I have what it was like when I was there, like immemorialized on my arm.
Cool.
And I can point to this and be like, yeah, I stood on this hill and watch the eruption over here. Like it's just fun.
I love that part of tattoos where it's like, this is where I was at this point in time, and this is what it meant to me. And and just that. The other thing that I think is really cool that I don't know if Amber knows what this is. Amber, do you know what this is?
It was a cup. I remember that she said she put like, okay, tell me the story again because you're.
Yeah.
I'm in my second drink right now. By the way.
No, that's okay. So this is a tradition in like marine geology. Is like every geologist who goes on a research cruise has to do this. Like
Okay.
my advisor in undergrad's office is filled with them. And what it is it's a styrofoam cup. The one on the left
Okay.
is like a
Yeah.
regular styrofoam cup,
Yep.
and you decorate it with like Sharpie. In this case, I drew a mountain on it. I drew Denali on it.
Uh-huh.
And so what they do with it is they take all the styrofoam cups and they put them in a net bag, and they tie it to the equipment that's going to the bottom of the ocean. And
Okay.
as it goes to the bottom of the ocean,
Oh, the pressure.
Yeah. shrinks the cup.
Yes.
And that's what makes it like that one on the right. And the mountain maybe doesn't like do it like justice, the drawing I did, but it's so funny because you can draw like the worst, stick figure, the worst drawing, but because it shrinks it and makes everything smaller, it makes it look like really detailed.
Yeah.
But they've
Yeah, that's
even
cool.
done this. Yeah, they've even done this with like those styrofoam like mannequin heads.
Yeah.
I think those are a little creepy, to be honest. But my advisor in undergrad had a ton of them in his office, and like I did this cruise in September, and like for Christmas that year, everyone in my family got a shrunken cup with various designs drawn on it. But
That's
as soon as people on the boat found out I knew how to draw, I drew like 7 dog portraits on set. Like you can't really tell from just the mountain, but I'm decent at drawing, and so everyone was like coming downstairs to make me draw their dog's portrait on the cup.
And then I did want to show, because you sent a video about, but I just want to play the video. So I really like that one, because it kind of goes with the following passion, because I think kind of lost in this too was you wanted to become a geologist, and so you sought that out. But I think the timing, like we kind of glossed over that. So you were 22 years old then when you decided to just, I'm gonna do this now, and this is what I want to do.
Yeah. I was 22, and I didn't actually end up going back to undergrad for geology until I was 25. I was taking I did like the community college classes and things like that, but I wasn't able to go back full time until I was 25 because school is expensive, and also because of financial aid reasons. Like you qualify for more financial aid when you're over the age of 24, I think, because before that they use your parents' income. And I was paying for my own schooling at that time, so I needed financial aid in order to go back to school. So I didn't go back to school full time until 25. And my parents love my job and my career now, but a lot of people have very strict ideas of like what it is to be successful. And also I had already put a pretty significant amount of time into this other degree. And if, with medicine, you have the degree, you have the job. It's very straightforward. Like there's not much like networking or anything really involved in like being like a doctor or a nurse or something. You have the job, you have the degree, you have the job. And that's not what it's like in geology. It's very network dependent, which is one of the reasons why being out in geology was more concerning. But it's also one of the reasons why my transition out of medicine, it wasn't so much that they didn't like geology, but that I was leaving medicine after putting so much time into it already, was very, very difficult, not just for my parents, but just like, people around me and in my life. And they're very happy with it now. And I actually, one of the photos is of Volcan Fuego in Guatemala. I went on that trip with my dad. I was like, if he didn't like geology before, I'm going to take him to an erupting volcano, and he's going to think it's awesome. And he did. But so they're very, exactly. Yeah, they're very supportive now. But when I made that transition, them and a number of other people in my life really treated it not how I saw it, which was I'm finally going after what I want. I can't wait to do this. But they saw this as this big, crisis where I had no idea what I was doing, and I was abandoning all, this, and I was ruining my life and making all these bad decisions. On top of that, coming out as gay, which compared to, I would say, a lot of people my parents dealt with fairly well, but they also had no idea that I was gay. And so there was a significant amount of denial involved at the beginning of that. So to them, this very sudden, they had no idea I didn't like medicine and suddenly I want to quit. And they had no idea I was gay and suddenly I'm a lesbian. In their mind, they were like, there's no way any of this is real. This is clearly like a mental break.
Right.
But which I understand, but it also, I felt like I had to do a lot of it. We didn't talk very much for many years after that whole situation. And so I felt like a lot of it I had to do without really any support and with a lot of self-doubt, because it's hard to believe in yourself when you feel like
when
no
you're
one else.
alone.
So, and so that whole process is something I think I've made a few videos like kind of referencing, just, things that I heard when I was in the middle of this very huge life transition. Like sometimes you really do have to like burn down the whole thing in order to start over and do something better. But when you're burning down that whole process,
it's hard.
All anyone around you can see is the fire. Like they don't know that you're doing something, that you're just a process of building something better. They just think you're destroying everything you've ever done. And so it obviously worked out, and I'm like very, proud of it and happy that I did it. But that whole process was very difficult, and it took me a long time to get to the point where I was confident that what I was doing was the right decision. It wasn't as though I immediately was like, yes, this is the right decision and I'm going to do it. I was going to do it, but I had no idea if it was the right decision. The whole pathway until, relatively recently, I was questioning the whole time, like, can I actually do this? Is this actually going to go the way I hope it's going to go? Because most people don't have, I think, that intrinsic sense of I'm going to succeed. You get that internally a lot of the time.
It's something that, I've seen it a lot more recently of, like I saw a quote somewhere that, it said, be brave or do it afraid. And it's one of those things that has actually come up a lot in our guests. Talking with, our very first guest of this season, Ellie Ringo, who is also a geologist, who said, I'm going to stop this mining job because I hate it. And I'm going to try to pursue more of an acting career. To Chase, the agate dude, who said, I'm going to literally just move to Hawaii and just get off a plane without a plan and just sort of live. And it's like, it's a lot of those like people finding out about who they are by getting themselves out of their comfort zone and just being, just breaking down all the barriers and just being themselves. And it can be scary, but like, I mean, as
you're like honoring your true self. And it's like, you're going to have obviously challenges, because in our society, honoring your true self isn't always welcome, because everybody wants uniformity. But it's like, that's where you find, like, if you're going to be happy in whatever you're doing, it's going to be when you're finding your true self and connecting to it. And what a scary experience. But what we're seeing from so many guests is that, like, doing that and basically saying, like, like, what you think, like, I'm going to do what I feel and what I want is, people are becoming, they're so far, because everyone's journey is still going. But in that journey, they're finding, like, their happiness and where their place in life. And so, like, that's a good feeling. Gosh.
Yeah. And it's another thing that, like, it doesn't come up in my content maybe as often as some other, like, concepts, but it is something that I think is important for people to know, because I think sometimes when you do things that aren't like the traditional way, or, or like the traditional age that you're supposed to do things, there's this sense that, like, you need to hide that from people because it's embarrassing or whatever. But I don't feel that way. I've been told by people that I've worked for that they think one of the reasons I'm such a hard worker is because I had such an appreciation from spending so long doing something I hated for now having this opportunity to do all these things that I love. So I put my whole self into it. So in some ways it's been a big positive, but like that's another kind of person I like to cater content to, is I get a lot of people in my comments being like, watching your videos gave me, the strength to, change my careers at 35 and like things like that. And it's so scary that I think those kind of things, especially that you never hear about people doing, at least not successfully, and that takes so much. You're risking so much. It's not like you're starting off and like there's this like sensical path. You're literally destroying everything you've done so far in the hopes of and it's a complete unknown. And so
Yeah.
I think it's really important for people to know that I hate the phrase like it's never too late because I feel like it's cheesy, but like it's never really too late. It might not be. I also try and be mindful of like I not being like time poor is also a thing. If you are raising 3 kids, or if you're a single parent or something like that, you have all these. It's not as easy. Not that it
Right.
was easy for me, but it's not as easy as it was for me to just like pick up and do something else.
Right.
But I also have met a lot of people where it is possible for them and it is in the cards for them and they do have the resources, but they won't do it solely because they're afraid. And if that's
Yeah.
the case, you need to just go for it because not everyone
Yeah.
can do it. Not everyone has the means, but if you have the means, you should do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah. You should do it. Just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, do it afraid.
Yeah,
We did
exactly.
get one question. Ernest has been
Okay.
commenting a lot. I see you,
Yes,
Ernest.
hi, Ernest.
Yes.
He,
Shout out to Ernest. Thank you for all your comments.
he was curious, have you ever found a diamond? Or I guess on that note, have you ever found, like, I guess your most prized crystal if you haven't found a diamond?
I haven't found a diamond. I went to like one of the only accessible like diamond mines. I can't remember if it was in Alabama or Arkansas.
Arkansas?
Arkansas.
Arkansas,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, not
Crater of
Alabama.
Diamonds. Yes.
Yes, that's where I went, and I wanted to find one, but I didn't find one.
It's so hard.
Yeah, it
It's a
was
lot
very
of work.
hard. Yeah. So hopefully one day I would like to find some Herkimer diamonds. Okay, let me think about my.
Ding 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 ding
Yeah.
ding.
Amber's gonna take you. You're
Yes,
you
like
just booked
okay,
it.
after the show, we're definitely going to talk about
we'll
this.
meet up. Okay, cool. I'm trying to think what my most valuable rock was. I can tell you the rock that costs the most, which is the mid-ocean ridge basalt, because those machinery costs a lot of money to go get them. I don't actually think I don't have a whole lot of monetarily like valuable rocks because they're just things I picked up random places.
I feel like that's kind of like a geologist thing, right? Like you
Yeah,
guys, like
The geologist.
Yeah.
If a general public person walked into a geologist's office, they would see nothing of value and would guess that they picked it up out of the sidewalk gravel because it's that indescript to them.
Yeah, and I mean, I do have some like my favorite rock shop is in Fort Bragg, California, and my girlfriend lives in California, and so that's every holiday I get a rock from that rock shop, right? And so I do have some like nice ones that aren't like igneous rocks. Most of what I work with is igneous, or I'll get metamorphic stuff from like random places. And they're really nice, but they're not like a gemstone like cost. It's like maybe if it's a really nice one, it might be like $40-50 or something. I don't think I have any gemstone quality anything. But I like the ones I have better than gemstone quality rocks.
All right. Sorry. I am like completely I had notes of things to ask you, and then all of a sudden we get on all these tangents.
Yeah, but we did really well. I mean,
I did want to ask. So you were I saw you were talking about field camp, and you mentioned Michigan, and I think because I saw something you said that you had a rock that you were showing that you got it from field camp, and you said there was dadolite in it. Where, as a geologist, I have to ask, where did you do your field camp?
So my field camp, we drove from Florida up to Michigan and back and stopped a bunch of places along the way. I'm pretty sure that the dadolite was at some like old mine in Michigan, or maybe I think it was Wisconsin actually.
Okay.
I think so. I can look in my field book if you're like super motivated, but or I can ask my professor where we went because he has the GPS coordinates.
Yeah, I was gonna say
probably up in the UP.
Probably. Yeah, I know we do have it in Minnesota. I've found some pieces of dadolite. I was gonna say I can't exactly see it, but I still have the binder from my field camp that has every stop and everything on it, which I mean, I found I think it was from the Green River. I actually found a really cool leaf, and I found I wish I could find it. It's I don't know if it's a cricket or a grasshopper fossil.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
cool.
and it was one of those
Yeah.
like really great because then all of a sudden it's like I have this field guide that says what formation we were in and the ages and like everything. It's all like laid out. It's not like
Nice.
some random
Yeah.
road cut that you just like find it. But I was
Yeah.
just really curious because I guess I saw that it was Florida, and then you're talking about like Michigan. I know a lot of people go west for their field camp, so you're like one of the few people I've heard of that have gone to Michigan for their field camp, which is cool.
Yeah, well, and truthfully, U.S. normally does go out west for it, but this was the first field camp they did in person after COVID, and they didn't
Oh,
know if
okay.
they didn't know if they were going to be doing it in person, and they waited so long to make a decision that all the places they normally went out west were just like booked, and so they were like, we're not going to do that. And the professor who ran field camp grew up in Michigan, and so he was like, I
Okay.
know all the good rock places, and so that's what we did. That's where we went.
So were you then? So you were in college studying
Mm-hmm.
geology when COVID happened?
So during like the real depths of quarantine, I was doing online classes. I did one semester of community college, and then I did 2 semesters online because I was living out of state and I wasn't in a position where I could move back to Florida for in-person classes. But
Okay.
once you get to lab work classes, you have to be in person. So at that point, I moved. But literally during like quarantine, I was living in Texas and doing classes online. And then right when quarantine kind of ended was when I moved to Florida in person to do all of my in the rest of my degree in person, essentially.
So is that so? Okay. So I'm really curious about this because
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about this while COVID was
Mm-hmm.
going on about universities canceling classes and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've heard this from before COVID of people saying,
Mm-hmm.
geology classes shouldn't be taught online. And,
Yeah.
these hard nosed, old school geologists that are like, everyone needs to do a field camp. It's got to be
Mm-hmm.
6 weeks long. You can't do
Yeah.
anything inside. It's got to be, this, that, whatever. And I was thinking
Yeah.
about this during COVID. It's like there's so much of geology that is
Yeah.
hand specimens, but on the other hand too, there's so much new technology.
Yeah.
So I guess like, could you maybe talk about like some of that? Like, I know
Yeah.
obviously like TikTok is its own
Yeah.
thing, but
Sure.
like
Yeah.
what is there now like with I guess accessibility of being able to do geology?
Yeah, so it's a very hot topic of conversation in geology because even more so than other sciences, I feel like geology is particularly excludes people with disabilities because it's such a physical job historically. However, I know many people who had to do a field camp who never intend to do any field work. So much can be done with computers and coding and things like that. And like, yes, even with jobs like that, you do generally have to do some kind of field something so that there's just some things you can only tell in the field. However, somebody else can go do the 1 week of field work that's required for the 5 year long coding project or whatever, and so
Right.
there is like a general move more towards that, and I think that it's really good for the career as a whole because something I was told when I started at USGS was like, there's all this like fieldwork data that no projects have ever been done for because back in the 50s or whatever, people would go and they'd do a field season and then they wouldn't finish the project, but then the next summer they'd still want to do field work, so they do another field season. So it's just like endless fieldwork data and not nearly as many supposed like projects that were getting done because they only wanted to do field work, which I understand. I love field work, but if you're always going to have these personalities in geology that are only interested in the field work. But then to complement that, you need to have some people who are like fine with doing all lab work and not doing like the physical aspect of it. And in order to do that, you need to make programs accessible to the kind of people who might not want to do that. And I think field camp is really important, but I do think that geology programs should offer like different tracks and have one that maybe doesn't include field camp, because while jobs in both sectors are still technically geology, they don't do the same thing, and you don't need the exact same like courses necessarily, especially one that limits who can do it successfully, like so strictly. And like I also think that there should be options for like more accessible field camps. some field camps you do need to do like more intense stuff, but there are, there's virtual field camps and things like that. And like, if you do a virtual field camp, no, you're probably not going to be as prepared to go, you can't go, hike in the Aleutians by yourself. But you don't necessarily need to know that. Sometimes you just need to understand the process that happens during field work so that you can incorporate it to whatever else you're doing. You don't necessarily need to be the person in the woods for 4 weeks without a shower. Like that's,
Right.
I love doing that, but not everybody wants to do that. And I think that should be okay. And I think that even now they're like, it's leaning towards that way, but there is still a lot of resistance. There's a lot of people who are more aligned with the old school way and feel like it's like ruining the essence, of geology. And like, I understand that they like have a soft spot for like the culture of geology they grew up in, but if the culture of geology is harming
changing
people, and if it's like, harming people and excluding people from the field, then the culture needs to change.
Completely.
So I know
I can't wait, by the way, I can't wait till you get older so that you can like be ahead of like these things and like make these decisions, because you are just, I love the way you think, the way you want to put things together and the change and the progressive. It's like, yes, we need that.
So I do have some other videos I didn't get to. I was just curious, were there any videos you sent that you want to have shown, or I do have your favorite video if you want me to show that.
I don't even remember.
Is that the one that she went? Wait. Can we see the one where she went viral? Like her very first TikTok viral one?
I have a couple here. Let me I'll show this one. I also have listed as viral. Okay. So let me show this one.
Okay. Yeah. So that one video got me 70,000 followers.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. And it was insane. That's like a third of my following now.
The most exciting moment where you go from like this many followers to like this many.
Yeah, it was nuts. And it also like, I mean, I already kind of knew this. I was already making gay geology content, but it was also very much like, it really solidified like, okay, this is my main audience. It's like gay people want to learn about rocks, and they want to learn about rocks from someone who's gay and makes puns about it. And now if I have a much more, my audience used to be pretty much like exclusively like, queer people. And now it's much more diverse, and I love that. But I've maintained like, the idea of it is like, you don't have to be gay to follow me, but you do have to support the LGBTQ community. Otherwise, I don't want your support. But that video drew a lot of people in for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think, like, speaking for, like, me and Ben, like, both of us are, heterosexual, and we love your content. Like, like, I mean, you don't have to be gay to enjoy.
It's funny no matter what.
It's funny, and it's just, like, it's good. It's refreshing to see, and I appreciate just seeing a different perspective on things. So
well, and I think it all comes down to, regardless of anyone's sexuality or race or anything, just be yourself. And it's one of those, don't change. I listen to a lot of comedians, and they kind of, they say that there's this thing with comedians, which applies to a lot of content creators and people, where it's like they try to make themselves into either someone they've seen or jokes that they think will work. And it's like, if you just be yourself, people will like that for that. The same thing with, musicians. You hear about like these huge bands like Queen that went to try to do these records, and the record label's like, this won't work. And then they just stuck to who they are. And then it ends up being this amazing thing. And it's like, it doesn't, don't make content for other people necessarily to make it to fit to what they want. You make it so that you're expressing yourself in the way that you want to do it. And you hope that people will support you and, lift you up. And that's how I think everyone should be, as a straight white man. I shouldn't be out there saying I'm better than someone, but I also just shouldn't be, hiding anything from it. I'm who I am, and you're who that, and like everyone, and just make your content and try to make people laugh and
because you'll find your people will find you. Like people are looking for you, and they want to connect with people like you. And so like just being yourself allows your people to find you. So
yes, except for that one person that just dropped off. I saw our viewers go down by one.
Well, that's okay.
We're talking a little bit. Yeah, but it's also like that's a lesson that I kind of try to anyone who asks me advice about doing like psychom on social media. That's usually the first advice I give is like, don't try and be this like super smart toys science person. People don't want to, people want to be able to trust you, and they can't trust you if they don't know who you are. There's a reason why like Hank Green, for example, has so many followers, even though a lot of the things he talks about, he doesn't have like an advanced degree in, but he's built a rapport and a trust with the people who follow him by being like authentic and honest about what he does and doesn't know. And so if you want to be a content creator and you want to be a science communicator on something like social media, you can't do psychom the way you do at a conference or in an article. Right. You have to show them who you are, or they're not going to buy into whatever you're talking about.
Right. Okay. So going back then to the videos, here is, yes. You said this was your favorite video.
Yes, I remember now. Yeah, that is my favorite video. So one of the people I went to the field with in Iceland was my best friend from undergrad, Laura, came with me. And that was our last day, like doing any field work. And I was like, Laura, you're not allowed to make fun of me, but I'm going to go hug the lava wall. And so that, she recorded and took a photo of me doing that. Now, I want to point out that was a cooled lava wall. That was not one of the hot ones. Don't hug hot lava walls. But I went up and hugged one of the cooled ones because that particular eruption is very accessible. It's right near the capital. A lot of people could go see it, and that's wonderful because it's this amazing thing. But it also was a little bit bittersweet. I went to the eruption before, like the main tourist season, like right after it erupted, and so when I first got there, almost no one else was there except for me and maybe a couple people who were like photographing it. And by the time I left, there was like a hot dog stand and a parking lot like within a mile of the eruption. And so I am very grateful that it's accessible and that people can see it. But I also knew that I would never be able to go back to this volcano and see it the way that it was then. And so there was also a lot of like I guess mourning that, because it obviously I got it tattooed on me. It had a lot of meaning to me, so I walked up and hugged it, and I really love that one because it also like I did a whole series of videos responding to comments on that video, because the comments on that video was a bunch of other scientists saying all the different ways they like hugged whatever they studied, or people being like, I can't hug what I study because I study really tiny bats and it would crush them, and or as I study, one person was like, I study like mortuary science, I'm really not supposed to hug things, and it was just the funniest responses. And it's like I thought it was a nice reminder that some people think of, scientists as these like, like poised, serious, like smart people. And it's like, no, we're all just like a bunch, especially geologists, we're all just like a bunch of kids playing in the dirt, like hugging lava. Like it's not, you know.
Yeah, I wish I had it handy, but yeah, I've got a picture of me in college hugging a basalt flow in, I think it was Idaho.
Yes.
But, yeah.
See? Yes.
Yep, you're not alone in that respect.
Yeah.
All right, so we are kind of a little bit over. I did want to bring up, so you are Dykanite on TikTok, and I believe you started a YouTube as well, or we're starting one?
So I made the account, and I think I have a single video posted on it. I am not optimistic about my ability to post on a third platform during a PhD, but the account does exist if people would like to follow it.
So what is your third platform? You got TikTok, YouTube,
and Instagram.
And Instagram.
Yes. Instagram reached 100K followers.
Yes, congrats! Woo! That's great.
And then we've mentioned this throughout the podcast, so if there's anything else you want to mention, please let me know. But you did talk about OSTEM. So where can people get more information about OSTEM?
Yeah, so OSTEM, I run the OSTEM TikTok account, which is right now pretty small, but I post the LGBTQ and scientist series on there, and I also post about other events that OSTEM does. It's essentially like a professional and student organization meant to support LGBTQ people in STEM, and they do scholarships and they do their own conferences and all kinds of cool stuff. And so they have their own Instagram pages. They also have chapters at a lot of different universities. So if you want to join a chapter at your university, you can. And then they have like a website. I think it's just ostem.com or something like that. But just Google OSTEM and their website will come up. And they do a lot of really, really good work. So even if you you don't necessarily want to like directly volunteer or get involved with the organization, even just like following them on social media helps. So
Okay, great.
Yes, that's
And then
great.
is there anything that we forgot or any questions you have?
No, I don't think so. I don't have any other questions. I don't think. I guess one thing I do want to say is I have this all the comments that I get like on my videos. I have a scrapbook where I keep them, and so that's
Aw.
something I like to mention because I think it's easy for people to have the attitude that it's like just social media. I kind of had that attitude when I started, especially like I don't know, I'm considered a little bit old for people who are on TikTok or whatever. But so I think people sometimes think that it's cringy and it's like social media and it can't possibly matter. But like I have an entire book filled of like just the most like amazing like heartfelt messages, and so the whole
Aw.
experience has like meant a lot to me.
That's
That's
wonderful.
Yes, it is. That's beautiful, and it really just shows, like, just how committed you are to, your passion and teaching and advocating. Like, that's I mean, you couldn't ask for anything more heartfelt than that.
Yeah.
That's great. That makes, people who watch content and are, like
Yeah.
and you watch when you're a content watcher, we get really
Yeah.
invested
Yeah.
in certain creators. And to
Yeah.
know that like there's a creator out there that really appreciates, the comments that, we're putting
Yeah.
out there, like that just that kind of connection, like
Yeah.
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
and
that makes
that's yeah, that's kind of the point in saying it, because it's so easy when the account is small to interact with every person individually. I can't do that with 350,000 people between all the platforms together. I can't respond to every DM, but the ones that I'm able to see and the ones that I'm able to get like really genuinely mean so much that people interact that way.
yeah.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
again for being our
Yes.
season finale guest.
yeah.
Yes, thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Ben actually is the one who, we sit and we talk about our guests, like who to have on, and he's like Dykanite, and he was telling me, I was like, "Oh yes, let's have her."
Nice.
So yes, thank you, Ben,
Awesome.
for
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
bringing her up because what a great guest. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Thanks.
this was a lot of fun. I'm glad to have another geologist on that we can kind of geek out a
Yeah,
little bit too,
for
since
Yeah.
sure.
I don't
Yeah,
always get that
same.
opportunity. And yeah, and so thank you to everyone for listening to season 2. We are
Yes.
wrapping up and we will be back. Season 3 is going to be January 10th,
Yep.
2024.
Yes.
Awesome.
Season 3, we're gonna have more incredible, passionate people in rocks, minerals, fossil world, and we're gonna get more creative, different angles and perspectives. Just like I'm really excited for season 3. I'm excited actually just to move this podcast because I think that like just like hearing people's stories and connecting to the people who are passionate in this hobby is what makes and builds like a great community within the hobby. So I'm really excited for season 3. So look out for us on January 10th at 8:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yes, and make sure to keep following us on TikTok, YouTube,
Yes.
Facebook, Rockhound Talk Live. We'll be posting updates, highlights, everything like that. You'll be able to find us on there. And then also, I know I've been behind on a few episodes, so if you're listening to this on Spotify, I'm sorry that it's taken me a long time to get there, but also make sure to follow us for the audio on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else that you can get your podcasts.
Yes. And thank you. And we were signing out, and we'll see you in 2024. Peace out, everyone.
Bye, everyone.